So I'm playing Madden, and my cousin wants to argue about the defensive schemes over a 4-3 and 3-4, and which is better. So I'm saying when I'm playing Madden, it depends on what team I have. Because contrary to popular demand, the schemes and the personnel and whoever the coach is, if we're watching a real NFL game, it just depends. One's not better than the other. 4-3, you have four linemen and three linebackers. 3-4, you have three linemen and four linebackers. So it depends on your personnel. When we talk about these schemes and which to use and which not to use, it just really has to do with the players. Lawrence Taylor, to me, was the best football player of all time, period. I'm sorry, defensive football player of all time. Now, we can argue Deion Sanders, Lawrence Taylor. We can go back and forth all day. Deion Sanders, of course, did a lot more. But when you have that Giants defense, they played a 3-4. Their linebackers were elusive and quick. They were athletic. And then you had guys like you have to, in order to have a 3-4, you got to have guys like Jim Burt and Leonard Marshall. They're going to clog that middle for you. And then later on, they get Pepper Johnson, Harry Carsons, Carl Banks, Gary Reasons. Those guys can play. They can cover. So you can use Lawrence Taylor in situations like that for a 3-4. When you talk about that Bears, which was the 46 defense, which was basically a 4-3 with Buddy Ryan. Yeah, they were a 4-3. Because you had Singletary, who was a thinker, and he could read defenses. But look at your front four that you had. You're going to run a 4-3. You got Fridge, Dan Hampton, Steve McMichael, and Richard Dent. You get that front four, putting pressure on the quarterback. You don't need an outside linebacker coming in as a defensive end sometimes. The linebackers, Otis Wilson and Wilbur Marshall, is not as athletic. Can't cover as well like a Carl Banks or a Lawrence Taylor. Yeah, they were physical. They weren't as athletic, but they got the job done. It was math mouse defense for them. And who had that? And just like the Giants, you have to have a defensive scheme for your personnel. Bill Belichick was under Parcells, and he was a defensive coordinator. Same thing with Marvin Lewis when he was with the Ravens, that first Super Bowl. They ran a 4-3. You got Big Siragusa and Sam Adams clogging up that middle, sliding down the line. Those guys would lean on you and move to the side, and once a running back issue, you boom right there. They ran a 4-3. It worked for them. I would say they're in between. Not as elusive or quick. Had Jamie Sharper and Bull Ware and of course Ray Lewis in the middle. Ray Lewis can get out there and cover a little. These guys are fitness, kind of a fitness type of backer crew. Of course, Ray Lewis being the most physical, but he could cover. But when you got guys like Siragusa, Jim Burt, Michael Carter, the Fridge clogging up, it doesn't matter if you're a 4-3 or a 3-4, because these guys are putting so much pressure on the quarterback and stopping the run, your DBs are going to get picks. But I tell you what you're not going to do. You're not going to get a guy out there to try and do something that they can't do. You're not going to have Suggs out there and you put him in a 3-4 and you expect him to guard some tight ends or guard some running backs, because he can't do it. Neither can Clay Matthews. They can't do it. Dwight Freeney, maybe. Derek Thomas, classic. You put him down there. Outside linebackers are glorified defensive ends. Derek Thomas was the greatest at this. He can cover and he can go after the quarterback. 20 sacks one season. Javon Curse another one. Joey Porter from Pittsburgh. These guys can do that. Marcus Ware. They can do that in a 3-4 or 4-3. But some guys you're going to put out there, they're not going to be able to do it. You have to know who your personnel is. That Orange Crush defense in 77, Tom Jackson, they were in 3-4. Tom Jackson, elusive, walk around, he can line up on the outside, line up in the middle. You can put him anywhere. The 3-4. And later on, Carl Mecklenburg. Same thing. It depends on who your personnel is. I mean, it just kills me with some people nowadays when they want to say one is better than the other. That 72 Dolphins team, that no-name defense, they could have used a 3-4 4-3. It didn't matter because they played. But some guys can't do it. Steel Curtain, 4-3 defense. And why not? Mean Joe Green and L.C. Greenwood, Lambert in the middle. And you got to think about it. Over the different eras of 3-4 and 4-3, some of them didn't work. It was a running league. It was a running league back then. So the Doomsday defense of Dallas, they used the 4-3 with Harvey Martin, Too Tall Jones, and Randy White and those guys. They didn't have a bunch of linebackers outside of Hollywood Henderson that was able to run around. Like Mike Hegman, he can't cover anyone. They dropped Randy White back in coverage sometimes. Because they had Bob Lilly and Too Tall Jones and all these guys. But it depends on who your personnel is. The Niners of the 80s had Hacksaw Reynolds. That guy couldn't move around as much. They had Fred Dean. They had a great defensive backfield with Lott and Eric Wright and Dwight Hicks and all those guys. So Fred Dean's putting pressure on the quarterback. Michael Carter putting pressure on the quarterback. These guys are getting picks. So they're able to play a 4-3. But it just depends on you. You can't put people in positions and expect them to win games because you change your defensive scheme. I read the Bible. Devout Christian, read the Bible. And I can pretty much read some of it and apply it to my life and get through life and teach my kids and fellowship with other brothers and kind of do life together with them and read and go over scripture. And yeah, I could do that. Put me in a pulpit as a pastor preaching to 500 people in a congregation. I'm going to botch it every time. Because that's not what I'm going to do. I'm not going to drop Michael Strahan back in cover 2 and expect him to get a pick. Michael Strahan is a defensive end. He's not an outside linebacker. So don't change your scheme to a 4-3 and expect him to do anything. And that's the problem with a lot of these coaches. They're not thinking like Bill Belichick or George Seifert of the 80s. That Bill Belichick Giants defense is probably one of the best defensive ever. Along with Buddy Ryan and Marvin Lewis, those Bears and Ravens teams. But as I was telling my cousin, pick your poison. There's so many teams that were out there that reverted from 4-3 and 3-4 because of their personnel, not because one defense was better than the other. And it gets me sick because a lot of these commentators now, they want to down one of them. And 3-4 is probably pretty much the base now for our modern day athletes in football and college and professional football because the game has changed and we got a lot of guys out there quick. You got linebackers that are like running 4-2s. So it makes sense. But it was more of a smash mouth football back in the day where you can use a 4-3. The linebackers were athletic. And like I said, the New York Giants got away with the 3-4. But let me know. Do you think one's better than the other? Leave a comment in the comments section. This is the Waters Rant.